back with Sound Politics now. And this whole back and forth between Washington and the Justice Department, State Representative Julio Cortes has had a front row seat to that. He was at Governor Ferguson's press conference this week, but he also represents Everett, Marysville, and the Tulalip Reservation in the state legislature and is the vice chair of the House Democratic Latino Caucus. Representative Cortes joins us now. Welcome. It's really good to meet you for the first time. I know you've talked to Scott before. Good to have you on the show. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me. I look forward to chatting. I mean, you know, being a state rep in the 38th LD, Everett, Marysville, Tulalip has given me a great experience, but I grew up in eastern Washington, so I have a good sense of kind of the entire state and what we've been seeing down there.
Democrats have argued that the Keep Washington Working Act lets local law enforcement focus on local issues. On the other hand, Republicans have said, and for example, the chairman of the state GOP said in an email this week, that that's a false premise, that he believes the governor is actively keeping immigration officials from accessing jails and prisons. The Keep Washington Working Act does generally limit that access, except in a few cases. For example, DOC can alert ICE when somebody is getting out of prison, and Ferguson has refused to close that loophole. I mean, what is your response to Republican arguments that basically this is impeding important law enforcement activity?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the Keep Washington Working Act is working as intended. I think that, first, the overwhelming majority of immigrants abide by the law. Washington state does not protect criminals. When anyone, regardless of their immigration status, commits a crime, they face consequences and are held accountable. That's what the Keep Washington Working Act is doing. And, additionally, I think that because of this law and that separation between state and federal forces doing their work, I think our community feels safer when interacting with our law enforcement. And I think that is something that's going to improve public safety overall and build community trust with our law enforcement. And I think that's really, really important, especially nowadays.
We know that obviously Trump is deporting more folks and detaining more folks who have not committed any crimes other than, being in the country without federal authorization. But I do, Republicans often talk about the ones, who do have criminal records, right? And this came up at the press conference you were at, and I wanted to ask you about this because there was a right-wing commentator, Brandy Cruz, who asked the governor about a case where an undocumented immigrant was found guilty of vehicular manslaughter after he hit a Washington State Patrol officer and killed him in a car. Ferguson, said if anyone breaks the law, kind of like what you just said, they will be prosecuted. It doesn't matter whether they're an undocumented immigrant or not. Cruz's question, though, she tried to ask it again. Ferguson didn't answer. I think it's not so much, the hypothetical of she was talking about he had previous run-ins with law enforcement, and if he had been deported during those run-ins with local law enforcement, he wouldn't have, killed the trooper. I'm not really interested in hypotheticals so much, but it's this underlying idea that someone who's undocumented commits a crime in Washington, we should work with the feds to deport them. How do you respond to that argument? Because I feel like it comes up a lot.
Well, I feel like that was an interesting point, but I think that whether they're an immigrant to this country or not, our laws should be protecting from that happening again, right? When somebody has their fourth or fifth DUI and is continued to be let out, then there has to be consequences for that. But that's our law, our state law, and so maybe we need to look at our state law and stop just kind of pointing the finger at whether they're immigrants or their color of their skin, and really focus on the laws that were broken and why they weren't held accountable the third or fourth time. I think that they're using immigrants as scapegoats for these specific things, and that just is wrong. It can't happen again. The overwhelming majority of our immigrants abide by the law. If we maybe take a step back and look at how many DUIs accidents are perpetrated nationwide, I can guarantee you that a very small percentage of those are immigrants, right? But that's what they're pointing the finger at, and it's wrong.
I want to turn to a more personal question, Representative, because the way ICE and the feds have been going about taking people, we've seen the videos out of Washington, D.C. and L.A. and different parts of the country. These are people who show up. We assume they're ICE, but we don't always know. They wear masks. They don't identify themselves. In some cases, they have fired guns. I mean, that happened to a family in San Bernardino. We learned today from a UW study that 14 people with ties to Washington have been sent to notorious prisons in El Salvador and Guantanamo Bay. And I think it's fair to say that this threat has an effect personally on people in the community. Can you talk to me about what you're seeing on the ground amid this atmosphere?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of fear for sure, right? And the fear comes from that not knowing. I think that if just the fact that these ICE agents aren't identifiable, they're not identifying themselves, is very, very scary, right? Because anybody can go out and buy a mask, and folks can have guns, and they can buy all that tactical gear online, right? And so how do we know that these are individuals that are there to serve a federal purpose and not just individuals who are out here causing chaos and fear? And so, it's definitely creating a lot of fear, and it's impacting not only, our communities feeling safe, but also our local economics, right? The folks that are not able to go to work because of fear that they're going to be picked up by ICE for no reason, the folks that aren't going to shop at grocery stores, at local food vendors, that impacts our local economies. And they're not going to work, right? Local businesses depend on these workers. The Keep Washington Working Act helps prevent labor shortages and keeps critical industries, like agriculture, for example. We've all seen the impacts on our agriculture industry when workers don't show up. It has a huge impact on our economy, and I don't think that that's being realized as much from our federal partners.
I know we talk a lot about work, and obviously it is important. I think obviously play is very important too. Celebration is very important too. And we've seen the impacts hit, even here locally, hit local celebrations, right? Gatherings. The Duwamish River Festival in Seattle's South Park neighborhood was canceled this summer. That's a majority Latino neighborhood in Seattle. Because of fears of deportation actions, they canceled that festival. There was the Thing Festival's Latin Day in Carnation that got canceled. And, reading comments online on local, like Reddit pages and things like that, Facebook, people say it feels like they're stealing our joy and literally shutting down our celebrations. How do you deal with that?
Well, I think we need our partners, right? We need not just the immigrant communities, but our communities as a whole to be there and show up for each other right now. I think now more than ever, Washington State at least has to come together and celebrate each other and make each other feel safe. It's absolutely, it's got an impact to our culture, and these are not just black and brown immigrants. It's immigrants from all races and colors that are not feeling safe here anymore, right? Whether you're from the Latin American community or Eastern European community or the Asian community, those fears are very, very real, and it's causing us to not have those celebrations anymore. But we need our partners to come together and celebrate for us when we can't do that. I think it's going to continue to be incredibly important for us to show up for each other right now.
Has this change in the way that the White House and the Trump administration is going about immigration enforcement affected you personally, Representative, or your family?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. My family travels to Mexico to visit family all the time, once a year at least. And I have family from Mexico that'll come up just to visit us and tour around. And that's not happening this year. It's not going to happen probably for the next couple of years, just because we are a little fearful of what may happen at the border. I myself, travel for work, and I do have a trip to DC coming up, and it's something that I'm very nervous about. I'm a naturalized citizen, but I'm going to be carrying my passport everywhere I go. I used to feel safe walking at night in DC and going to explore before, and now that this is happening in DC, that safety is just not there for me anymore. So I'll probably be sticking closer to the hotel.
Representative Julio Cortes represents Washington's 38th Legislative District and is the vice chair of the House Democratic Latino Caucus. Is there anything else you want to add, Representative, before we go?
Well, I think that, we got to keep in mind that, immigrants here in Washington State, they pay state and federal taxes, and in many cases contribute to Social Security, a system that they are never going to benefit from. And so we need to remember that they are contributing members to our community and important members of our community. And additionally, one more thing I just wanted to make sure that we're all aware of is programs supported by these funds that are being threatened help all Washingtonians. Cutting them would have very harmful impact on our public safety, our public health, and our economy, and not only in immigrant communities. it's going to be a huge negative impact on all of us. So let's keep that in mind.
Thanks, Representative.
Thank you.